أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for coming to the Majlis tonight. This will be a series of four majalis regarding the Arba'in of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. To start the Majlis, I would like to invite Taha Chawla with the recitation of Quran. Please recite aloud salawat.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والنازعات غرقا والناشطات نشطا والسابحات سبحا فالسابقات سبقا فالمدبرات أمرا يوم ترجف الراجفة تتبعها الرادفة قلوب يومئذ واجفة أبصارها خاشعة يقولون أئنا لمردودون في الحافرة أئذا كنا عظاما نخرة قالوا تلك إذا كرة خاسرة فإنما هي زجرة واحدة فإذا هم بالساحرة هل أتاك حديث موسى إذ ناداه ربه بالواد المقدس طوى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقل هل لك إلى أن تزكى وأهديك إلى ربك فتخشى فأراه الآية الكبرى فكذب وعسى ثم أدبر يسعى فحشر فنادى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى إن في ذلك لعبرة لمن يخشى أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها رفع سمكها فسواها واغطش ليلها وأخرج ضحاها والأرض بعد ذلك دحاها أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها والجبال أرساها متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الطامة الكبرى يوم يتذكر الإنسان ما سعى وبرزت الجحيم لمن يرى فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى يسألونك عن الساعة أيان مرساها فيما أنت من ذكراها إلى ربك منتهاها إنما أنت منذر من يخشاها كأنهم يوم يرونها لم يلبثوا إلا عشية أو ضحاها صدق الله العلي العظيم. الصلوات.
Muhammad. MashaAllah, that was Taha Chawla. Now I would like to invite Muhammad Ibrahim for salam. Please recite aloud salawat.
Stay, your mother wants you to smile. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. My son, al-Qasim. My son, al-Qasim. Qasim, I am your uncle and this is my battle. Qasim, tell me the yearning for death, why do you feel? Qasim, this is my tragedy, this is my trial. Qasim, don't let me hear another mother's wail. Qasim, don't let me hear another mother's wail. Stay, on me your mother's tears hail. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. My son, al-Qasim. My son, al-Qasim. Tell me, your eyes see a path that before you beams. Tell me, is it your martyrdom or your mother's dreams? Tell me, for her emotions, what shall tomorrow deem? Tell me, will tears of joy or of grief from her eyes stream? Tell me, will tears of joy or of grief from her eyes stream? Stay, her heart is caught in a gale. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. My son, al-Qasim. My son, al-Qasim. Listen, she's a mother and every mother's the same. Listen, every day of your wedding your mother dreams. Listen, if this dream of hers impossible became. Listen, her heart would ache every time she heard your name. Listen, her heart would ache every time she heard your name. Stay, daily she'd recall this tale. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. My son, al-Qasim. My son, al-Qasim. You go wearing your father's armor and his turban. You go while your mother prepares for you a coffin. You go, she throws away every marriage thought and dream. You go, her dreams die and become her tribulation. You go, her dreams die and become her tribulation. Stay is something she cries out while. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. Stay, you leave her to cry and wail. My son, O Qasim, my son, O Qasim.
MashaAllah, Muhammad Ibrahim. Before we move forward with the program, for the sponsor of tonight Majlis, for volunteers, for reciters and all the attendees, please recite a loud salawat. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just a quick announcement. There will be 4 programs for the Arba'in of Imam Hussain alayhi salam every day after Maghrib. English will be here and the Urdu program will be in the adjacent hall. As you can see, the hallway is very tight and we don't have a lot of space for people to stand there other than just going to the restroom or leaving. So we request brothers and sisters to please use the hallway wisely so that we don't have an issue of crowding outside. Also, for sisters, we request them to use the back door on the right side for exit, because there is a majlis going on next door, so that there is less rush and brothers can take an exit from here. We are trying our best to accommodate the traffic so that we don't have the crowd in the hallway. Please recite a salawat. We are fortunate to have Shaykh Reza Hemyari with us for the next 4 lectures. Our topic will be around spiritual, historical and ethical dimensions of Ziyarah. A little bit of introduction about Shaykh Reza Hemyari. He grew up in Virginia and received an MA in religious studies from George Washington University. After this, he pursued several years of Hausa education in Najaf, Iraq and at the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Seminary in Chicago. Currently, he resides in Qom, Iran, with his wife and children, where he is furthering his Hausa studies, and he is also simultaneously completing his doctorate in Islamic studies from University of Chicago. With that, I would like to invite Shaykh Reza Hemyari for the majlis tonight. Please recite a loud salawat.
Thank you. That's good, yes. For your own marhumin and the marhumin of the rest of the community, please recite a Surah Al-Fatiha masbughatan bis-salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وعلى الطاهرين. Please recite a second louder salawat. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are gathered here to commemorate the 40th day after the Shahadat of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and also to take part in the season of Ziyarah, the season of visiting and doing pilgrimage towards the Imam. This is not just a physical pilgrimage, but it is also a spiritual one in which all mu'mineen, all in fact Muslims, are called to go towards. And this is also the topic that I'd like to spend the next few nights discussing, this idea of ziyarat. In fact, it is said that on the 40th day, this whole process and procession of Arba'in began with the ritual of ziyarat by the companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi himself, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, who went towards the grave, the freshly dug grave of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and committed the first ziyarat after the Imam's death. Now, we have heard in ahadith that even before Jabir, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet of Islam, Jibreel, many of the previous prophets as well, they are said to have done ziyarat of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein with that knowledge that God possesses and that God had granted them. But when we come to our own day, and when we think about the role that ziyarat plays in our life, sometimes it's not quite clear. And the problem here is not just that we don't understand a lot of times what ziyarat is, or the function that ziyarat has. But the problem actually lies a little bit deeper. It's really, what are we looking for in our religion and in our religious tradition? To just kind of clarify and make the question a little bit more palatable and make it a little bit more interesting, there's a hadith of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And this is a hadith that's not a single hadith, it is repeated throughout our ahadith. It is a hadith from the sixth Imam in which the Imam talks about his father, Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, wherein the Imam is talking to one of his companions. And then the Imam says, or rather the person says, Man tazuru wa man turidu bihi. A person who goes and does ziyarat, and what is it that that person wants, and why is it that that person is doing that ziyarah. قال الله تبارك وتعالى من صلى خلفه صلاة واحدة يريد بها الله لقي الله يوم يلقاه وعليه من النور ما يغشى له كل شيء يراه. The Imam says, this is the fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, he says that Allah will grant a person, an individual, who goes and does a salat, a prayer, behind the grave of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. A person who has done ziyarat goes towards the grave, and he does a salat, a single salat, behind the grave of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, a salat in which he desires only Allah. Allah, He will, on the day of judgment, He will meet Allah, and this person will be covered in a light, which will cover over everything that he sees. Wallahu yukrimu zawarahu. And Allah Himself honors the pilgrims towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. وَيَمْنَعُ النَّارَ أَن تَنَالَ مِنْهُ شَيْئًا. And Allah will prevent the fire from touching the za'ir of Imam al-Hussein. وَإِنَّ الزَّائِرَ لَهُ يُتَنَاهَ لَهُ دُونَ الْحَوْضِ وَأَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ قَائِمٌ. And then the Imam continues to describe the blessings that this person is going to receive. That this person is going to be given water, the water of the Hawd, that blessed Hawd in the paradise before someone enters into the heavens of God. And this person will be given that water from the hands of Amirul Mu'mineen himself. In other words, the Imam is saying that if a person goes and does ziyarat of Abu Abdullah, Allah will wash away all of the sins of that person. And we have other ahadith that mention this. That a single ziyarat, sometimes this idea of a very intentional ziyarat is mentioned, and sometimes a very general ziyarat is talked about. This is the honor and the blessing that this person would receive. Now, sometimes when we read these ahadith or we hear them, we might think to ourselves, first of all, what is the function that ziyarat plays in my religious life? A lot of people I might see, they go and do ziyarat, and they might even pay the same amount of money that they were saving for the rest of their year. They might actually fall into some sort of financial difficulty so that they can do the ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein. And so on the one hand, they're putting themselves in difficulty and maybe their own families in difficulty to commit this one act, to go on this journey. On the other hand, we meet a lot of people who they go to ziyarat and then they come back, and we don't really see any change in their actions or in their person. Are these people counted as well? Does Allah also promise those people who don't change their actions or who don't change their relationships towards other people? Are those also people who Allah Himself honors? And so we might think, what is the effect? What is the outcome that this ritual or any other ritual that Islam talks about on a person's life? On the other hand, whenever we look at religion, a lot of times we see and we want something actionable, something practical. I say this because I sometimes hear about it, that they say, when you give a lecture, give some practical points. Mention some things that I can implement in my life. And that is very good. Islam is not a religion which calls us simply to know or simply to think to just acquire knowledge and ahadith and verses of the Quran and then leave it at that. Islam is a religion that calls for action as well. And so you have, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu wa amilu salihat, people who believe and do good deeds. But then, is that all that we're looking for in Islam? Simple, sort of ethical guidelines. This is how you should behave with your family. This is how you should behave with your coworkers or with your employers, with your employees, and so on. A lot of these things, we don't really need religion to tell us. Religion doesn't need to come and tell me I should be kind and I should be generous towards my family. You find a lot of non-Muslims actually having a better ethical life. They do better and they do more good things than a lot of Muslims do. And so the question becomes, what are we looking for in religion? And in particular, what are we looking for in ziyarat? How should we view ziyarat in our religious life? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And as I mentioned, a lot of times we are looking for religion to give us some ethical and practical guidelines. But religion is not simply limited to that. In fact, when we are thinking about ziyarat, initially many of the companions of the Ahlul Bayt, and inshallah in the next few nights we'll talk about some of these, they come to the Imam and they're asking the Imam for example, guidelines on how to do ziyarat of the shuhada in Medina, or how to do ziyarat of the other Aimma in Baqi or Rasulullah himself. And then the Imam, he responds. Some of these people are from the city of Kufa. He says to them, what is with you people of Kufa? Why do you not go and do ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein? Those people might be thinking, well, the grave of Rasulullah, or the grave of the Shuhada in Baqi, or the other Ahlul Bayt in Baqi, are they any less than Imam al-Hussein? Whereas the Imam, he says, no, that is more important. They prioritize certain things in our lives. And a lot of times, we do not see what those priorities are. And that is one of the greatest things that Islam gives to us. It gives us a sense of what priorities I should live my life based upon. I know all of the ethical guidelines, or at least I may be able to think about them, and I may be able to use trial and error. On one hand, I try to teach my son or my daughter in one way with force. That doesn't work. Another time, I try a different way. So sometimes I can understand what those ethical guidelines are. But a lot of times I don't know how to prioritize my own life. And it is religion that gives me those priorities. But then religion also gives me something much more. It gives me a sense of what the limits of my understanding are. There are certain things that I simply cannot understand. And religion and the wahi of Allah, the revelation of God, ultimately is trying to show me the limits of who I am as a human being. There are part of one of the ahadith of Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He says to us what are the mission of the prophets. That the prophets, they come and tell people, they proclaim to them all of the things that God has made a covenant with them. And then they also come and uncover the parts of their intellect that are hidden. لِيُثِيرُ لَهُمْ دَفَائِنَ الْعُقُولِ. All of those things in my intellect that I simply on my own and according to the life that I live, I could not have uncovered myself. And so the prophets come and they uncover my intellect so that I can get to certain knowledge, to things that are unseen, that I could not have discovered on my own. And in fact, this is one of the attributes of the muttaqeen. Hudan lil muttaqeen. This is Surah Al-Baqarah. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those who believe in that which they cannot see. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And based on that which they cannot see, based on their belief, then they act. Now, this is not to say that we should blindly follow any tradition, but it is to say that religion comes and shows us the extent of what we can understand, and it pushes us to uncover parts of our intellect that might have been covered up. And then it comes and tells us there are certain things that you simply cannot understand. And so when we look in those ahadith that talk about the angels are circling around the qabr and the place of the coffin or the qabr of Imam al-Hussein, the place where he is buried, we simply cannot uncover that. I don't quite understand what does it mean for the angels of God to come and circle around the burial place of Imam al-Hussein, or that the angels are crying over Imam al-Hussein, that it is the person of Imam al-Hussein who is the source of refuge and the source of guidance for even the angels of God. Or that in other ahadith, the heavens and the earth cry for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. All of these ahadith I can't quite understand. And part of religion is to tell me that I am a limited human being. Now, with that introduction out of the way, I'd like to just mention a few of the dimensions of ziyarat that we are told by the Ahlul Bayt and we can uncover through the Quran itself. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And I mentioned this introduction not just in passing, but also because we need to change the way sometimes we approach our religious traditions and many of our ahadith. A lot of times, the things that we are looking for in the ahadith are not the things that the ahadith are trying to point us to. I have a limited sense of what the ahadith should tell me, and the ahadith are telling me to broaden my horizons. One of the aspects of ziyarat, when we look in the word ziyarat itself, the ahadith, they tell us that ziyarat is a visitation, and this is from the word itself. Zara yazuru means for me to go and visit someone. I can visit my brother or my sister in Iman, particularly when they are sick, and this is one of the points that the Ahlul Bayt particularly focus on. The connection and the relationship between the mu'mineen. And so a mu'min is called to do ziyarat of his brother in Iman, not just after they have passed away, but in this life. But later on, ziyarat becomes a particular term. It becomes a ritual, a journey away from that which is familiar to me towards one of the Imams. And this ritual begins with Imam al-Hussein. As I mentioned, the first time that ziyarat was undertaken was by the companion of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. On the 40th day after the death of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. So on the one hand, and there are 2 points that I'd like to make here before I round out my discussion tonight. First is that when we do ziyarat, we are going on a journey. We are going on a trip. Back in the day, when people would go on ziyarat or they would go for hajj, the first thing that you think about in Islam, the pilgrimage that you think about is the hajj pilgrimage. And this hajj pilgrimage for people who lived maybe even a couple generations ago, would take months. And for some people, I was reading in one of the accounts of some of our ulama, they recount from their teachers that some people it would take even years to go from their own home to Hajj, to Mecca. And so this is sometimes a very difficult journey, but it is a journey nonetheless. Ziyarat on the one hand is a journey, but on the other hand, it is the journey towards a human being. And these are the two dimensions I'd like to mention. On the one hand, what does journeying and traveling mean in Islam? Because in the Quran itself, it talks not just about going towards another place, but it talks about ziyarat or journeying or traveling as one of the key messages and the key ways that Allah reveals and guides human beings. And so we have in various ayat of the Quran, Allah talks about sayr, siru fil ard, journey through the land. In one ayah in the Quran, Surah Al-Ankabut, ayah number 30, Allah says, say, O ye Prophet, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقِ ثُمَّ اللَّهُ يُنْشِئُ النَّشْأَةَ الْآخِرَةَ. So journeying, going from that which is comfortable and familiar to me towards the rest of God's creation is a way for God to guide me towards the deeper realities of His creation. Siru fil ard, journey and travel through the land. Fanduru, and see with your own eyes, and hear with your own ears. Kayfa bada al khalq, how this world appears and was created. ثُمَّ اللَّهُ يُنْشِئُ النَّشْأَةَ الْآخِرَةَ. And then God will create another creation. So journeying becomes a way for us to be guided through the very physical creation of Allah. But then there is another meaning for journeying, another purpose. In Surah Fatir, ayah number 44. أَوَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَيَنْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Will you not journey through the land? Again, on the one hand, we are journeying and we are looking at the physical and material creation of God. On the other hand, we are thinking about how people before us lived. فَيَنْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ وَكَانُوا أَشَدَّ مِنْهُمْ قُوَّةً. So you go and you journey through the land so that you can see the ultimate conclusion of the lives of those who came before you. عَاقِبَةَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Those civilizations that have passed before us. Those people who have lived, and these people, وَكَانُوا أَشَدَّ مِنْهُمْ قُوَّةً. Many of these people had even more power than we have. The other day I was mentioning this idea of progress, that we think we have reached to a stage in our civilization, in our lifetimes, that no one has preceded before us. But Allah in the Quran, He tells us that one of the purposes of a person to journey, to travel through the creation of God, is for him to understand, not just to understand in his mind, but for him to see the end of those who came before them. Some people who were even stronger than us, who had more power and who had more control over their people than we do. And then Allah talks about Fir'aun, who could kill as he wished, and he could imprison his own people as he wished. And see what the fate of a person like Fir'aun was, and all of the other people who came before us. Many of whom who had more power, many who had more wisdom, or maybe even had more knowledge than we do. So on the one hand, Allah talks about sayr, journeying through the land. On the other hand, in the Quran, Allah talks about hijrat, or hijrah, doing a pilgrimage, again, out of the thing that is comfortable and familiar to us towards a thing which is uncomfortable. Sayr is a way for Allah to guide us through our own intellect, through that which we know or we can discover on our own. On the other hand, hijrat is a way for Allah to guide us, and a lot of times this is through the Prophet or through his revelation. And so, beginning of our calendar is the hijrat of the Prophet, out of the land of his own family, of his own upbringing, forsaking all of that for the sake of Allah. And hijrat now becomes one of the pillars of the Islamic religion. Not only does it mark the beginning of our calendar, but it also becomes the one thing that defines the Muslims, that they are willing to move and give up everything that they have for Allah. This hijrat was a process, it was a ritual not just for the Muslims, but even before the Muslims. And in fact, we have pilgrimages from people who came before. Salman al-Farsi, he is known, when you look in the biography of Salman, the journey of Salman towards the Prophet was a journey of discovery, of guidance. He leaves his homeland in the Iranian lands, and then he goes from one place to another. One guide, one individual who knows more, Christian monks and so on, goes from one individual to another until he finally gets to the city of Medina, and he finally is able to discover the Prophet of Islam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And so this hijrat, this idea of hijrat, was something that was there even before the Prophet of Islam. But now with the Quran, it prioritizes and it focuses on this idea of journeying out of our homes for the sake of Allah. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ يَرْجُونَ رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Those who believe, and not just those who believe, but also those who do hijrat, who leave and forsake their own homes, but for the sake of God. They do this for Allah. وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and they're willing to fight, and they're willing to give up even their own lives. أُولَٰئِكَ, those are the people who can hope for the mercy of Allah. وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And Allah indeed is forgiving and He is merciful. So all of those things that we committed and we did in the past, Allah will forgive those for us and of us if we do that hijrah. And then in other ahadith, Allah says that in fact those who do hijrat in their hearts, but then they go back towards their previous customs, those people cannot have hope in the mercy of God. And this becomes even an aspect of our fiqh. People who go back to their previous rituals and their previous customs after they have entered into Islam. On the one hand, Allah says to journey, to do sayr, to uncover the things that we can uncover on our own. On the other hand, Allah says to do hijrat, to understand and to show in action our guidance and our understanding of the Prophet's revelation and the Prophet's tradition. This is the part of journey. As I mentioned, Ziyarah, we're going to just talk about two of the dimensions of Ziyarah. On the one hand, there is this aspect of journey. But on the other hand, there is a journeying towards someone. It's towards an individual. And this is one of the things that the Quran talks about constantly. The Quran does not just simply point us towards certain principles or towards certain traditions, but the Quran constantly reminds us of individuals who have lived a good and prosperous life, an individual who has lived up to the principles that the Quran talks about. And these individuals are the ones who can hold their head up high on the Day of Judgment. We want to think about what is it that we are looking for in our religion and through our religion. One of the most beautiful ayat of the Quran, Allah talks about that on the Day of Judgment, those people are going to be saved and are going to enter into the heavens that Allah has promised. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَاهَا بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Not necessarily people who have accumulated all of the wealth, people who we think are successful, but an individual who goes towards Allah with a qalbin salim, with a purified and a righteous heart. That is the thing that we are looking for the lives that we live. We are looking to live a good life, be a good human being. A human being who lives a life according to the dictates of the Prophet. And so in our lives we look after certain models that we base all of our actions on. And we think about Hajj, for example. The Hajj itself is a process for us to model our actions according to the actions of the prophets, of Ibrahim and Ali Ibrahim. So in Surah Ibrahim, Allah mentions this explicitly. Ibrahim, the prophet of Allah, he goes and he takes his family, his wife, and his young infant son towards this land. And they are foreigners and they are all alone. They have no one to protect them. He is, in other words, leaving that which is familiar, leaving all of the comforts that he has at his home, and he is taking his family towards a land which is difficult, which is unbearable. And so Ibrahim turns towards Allah. رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ. Think about journeying. Think about going towards a place that is totally unfamiliar and that is totally unsafe. Allah talks about journeys of His prophets throughout His Quran. Talks about the journey of Musa, going towards Misr, Egypt, to an unknown land, and then going back towards that danger that he was looking forward to, or that he was expecting back in Egypt. In another case, Allah talks about Ibrahim. Ibrahim takes the hand of his wife, or Hajar, and his infant son, takes them towards a land which has no fertility, has no farm or farming. عند بيتك المحرم. But Allah, Ibrahim does this dua, Oh Allah, I am taking my family towards this unfertile, this land which has nothing that can give to them. But I am bringing them towards your own sacred and sanctified home. رَبَّنَا لِيُقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ. And oh Allah, my only hope, my only purpose in doing this is so that your salat can be established. فَاجْعَلْ أَفْئِدَةً مِنَ النَّاسِ تَهْوِي إِلَيْهِمْ. So, oh Allah, make the hearts of people lean and go towards them. And so, the Hajj process and procession, it begins. We are doing Hajj, in other words, to follow in the footsteps of Ibrahim. Not just so we can commit certain acts, but so we can embody and model our lives and our actions according to the life and the actions of Ibrahim, to give up that ultimate sacrifice. Whatever we have, leave all of that behind so that we can discover something greater. And that is so that our hearts can as well lean and yearn towards Dhurriyyat Ibrahim. And according to many of our ahadith, the Ahlul Bayt tell us that this Dhurriyyat Ibrahim is in fact the Ahlul Bayt themselves, because they embody to the fullest extent, the principles of Ibrahim himself. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And now we get to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, the Ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein. We said on the one hand, journeying is a way for us to discover the creation of God, both in the external world as well as among human beings. But journeying is also for us to model our lives after certain individuals that God has sanctified, that God has raised above all other people. And it is to prioritize those people's actions and those people's lives over our own, so that we can attain a certain rank that Allah has made particular for individuals that sometimes we can't even understand. This ayah of Surah An-Nur that I mentioned in the beginning. It says, فِي بُيُوتٍ أَذِنَ اللَّهُ أَن تُرْفَعَ وَيُذْكَرَ فِيهِ اسْمُهُ يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْآصَالِ. This is after the famous ayah of Nur, wherein Allah describes Allah nuru samawati wal ard. He says Allah himself is the light of the heavens and the earth. And then Allah gives a beautiful picture of what those heavens and the earth, or rather what that light of Allah embodies and what it manifests. That it is the most beautiful and the most brilliant light, that it shows the rest of God's creation. It shows us the purpose of God's creation, and it guides us back towards Allah. And then Allah says, this light is not just something out there. It's not just certain principles that you can live your life based upon. It is manifested in the houses of certain individuals. فِي بُيُوتٍ أَذِنَ اللَّهُ أَن تُرْفَعَ وَيُذْكَرَ فِيهِ اسْمُهُ. This light of God is harnessed in the houses of individuals that Allah has allowed to be raised up. And these are houses in which Allah's dhikr is mentioned. يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْآصَالِ. Allah is praised in those houses in the morning and at night. And so when we think about journeying in Islam, it is not simply about discovering the creation of God, nor even about modeling our lives after certain individuals, but it is about going towards people like Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, yearning for people like Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, those houses in which Allah's light is harnessed, those houses which contain Allah's light. And it is through going to those people that now we can become amongst those people. That is the process of journey. That we have an ultimate goal. Ziyarat ultimately is a ziyarat that we take steps towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. And that is why when we look in the various ahadith, the Ahlul Bayt tell us that journeying towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein will give an individual a light on the Day of Judgment that will cover over any of his sins. That is the light that we seek. It is said in various ahadith, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It is said in various ahadith that the Prophet himself will do dua and will pray for the Za'ir of Abu Abdullah. There is one hadith I'd like to mention in which صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. In which the sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, he says to one of his companions, this companion asks the Imam, what is the benefit of going and doing ziyarat? Why should I go and do ziyarat? The Imam responds, أَمَا تُحِبُّ أَنْ يَرَى اللَّهُ شَخْصَكَ وَسَوَادَكَ فِي مَنْ يَدْعُو لَهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَعَلِيٌّ وَفَاطِمَةٌ وَالْأَئِمَّةُ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامُ. A person who journeys towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, that person can become an individual who Allah will see that person on the Day of Judgment. Words of Imam al-Sadiq, he says, do you not want to be amongst those people that Allah looks towards you and towards your family as amongst those people who the Prophet of Islam himself and Ali and Fatima and the rest of the A'immah, they do dua for, they pray for, and they become their own shafi'ah on the Day of Judgment. This is the rank of a person who does ziyarat, a person who has attached themselves to the Imam. Let us turn towards the events after the events of Ashura. We mentioned journeying towards Imam al-Hussein. But right after the events of Ashura, the caravan of Imam al-Hussein is not journeying towards the Imam. They're journeying away. They're being pulled away by the enemy soldiers. They're going and being taken to one city after another. They begin with the city of Kufa. And this is one of the most difficult points in the journey of Lady Zainab and Imam Zainul Abidin. Not only because this was a city familiar to them. In the end of the day, Lady Zainab, she grew up, at least spent 5 years of her life during the time of her father, Ali ibn Abi Talib, in the city of Kufa. But it was also a city in which the people of Kufa knew the Ahlul Bayt, and they were taught by Zainab herself. And so this was a very difficult interaction. On the one hand, Lady Zainab and the caravan of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, they are coming back towards a city that is familiar to them, but they are being brought back now in chains and in collars of iron towards that city. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen wa ibn Sayyid al-Wasiyyin. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Fatimata Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum فنفوز معكم فوزا عظيما. Yes, Lady Zainab is coming towards the city of Kufa, but she had been prepared by her father, Amirul Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib himself. It is said that on the deathbed of Imam Ali, Lady Zainab asks her father, I have heard from Ayman, the wife of Rasulullah himself, that a day will come in which such and such event will happen. Amirul Mu'mineen, he responds that yes, Ayman said correct. What she said was true. That a day will come in which my Hussein is going to be killed on the plains of Karbala. And you are going to be dragged from one city after another in chains and in collars as prisoners of the enemy of Allah and of His Prophet. And so it is said that Amirul Mu'mineen tells Zainab, Sabran, sabra. Oh my Zainab, have patience. Have patience in the face of those tragedies. But who could have prepared Zainab for what she saw? It is said that on the plains of Karbala, as Zainab is being dragged away from the battleground and the battlefield, it is said that at one moment, Zainab, she throws herself off of the camel and she runs towards the battlefield, trying to find the body of Hussein, her brother. And then when she believes she has found the body of Hussein, she casts her own body on top of the body of Hussein. And then she is gathered and she's placed back on the camel. And now she is brought towards the city of Kufa. And it is a city which, again, was familiar to Zainab. But Zainab is now brought in a state that is unfamiliar to the people of Kufa. And so it is said that when the people of Kufa see these prisoners being brought into the city, many of them have to ask, who are these prisoners who are now entering into the gates of the city? And when they are told, this is the haram of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, they begin to cry and they begin to wail. And this is where Lady Zainab and Imam Zainul Abidin and Kulthum, and on the other hand, even Fatima, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, they begin to give their proclamations and their lectures and their orations. It is said that Lady Zainab, she turns towards the people of Kufa and she says to these very people, Atadrun waylakum ayyu kabadin li Muhammadin farathtum wa ayyu ahdin nakathtum wa ayyu karimatin lahu abraztum. O you people of Kufa, you cry now, but do you know what heart of Muhammad you have broken? And do you know what covenant towards Muhammad you have broken? And what honor you have placed under your feet? وَأَيُّ حُرْمَةٍ لَهُ هَتَكْتُمْ. And do you know what honor you have dishonored of Muhammad? And then, as the people are crying, Lady Zainab's voice becomes even higher. ماذا تقولون إذ قال النبي لكم. What would you say to the Prophet of Islam when you go towards him? ماذا صنعتم وأنتم آخر الأمم. On the day of judgment, when you, O people of Kufa, when you go back towards the Prophet of Islam, what will you tell to the Prophet of Islam? How will you explain to the Prophet that you forsook Hussein and you let him without anyone to come and protect him? You left him all alone. On the day of Ashura, maybe Lady Zainab tells them that I heard with my own ears that Hussein would call out, Ayyu Nasirin yansuruna. That Hussein would call out, who amongst the people of this ummah will come and protect me? Ayyu dhabbin an harami Rasulillah. Who amongst this ummah will come and protect the haram of the Prophet of Islam? How will you explain this to the Prophet? That you were the ones who forsook him, and amongst you are the very same individuals who raised your swords and your spears against Hussein. بأهل بيتي وأولادي وتكرمتي منهم وسارى ومنهم ضرجوا بدم. How will you explain to the Prophet when he asks of you, what did you do to my Ahl Bayt? And what did you do to my own children? That now I see some of them imprisoned, and I see others of them with their blood spilled on the ground. And it is said that Lady Zainab, she gives her khutbah, and she gives her speech, and then Imam Zainul Abidin tries to quiet Lady Zainab. And then Imam Zainul Abidin, he himself as well, he speaks. And then Lady Kulthum, she as well gives an oration, and it is said that the entire city of Kufa is now mourning and is crying out loud. And the enemy soldiers, they hear this. And it is said that Ibn Ziyad, he is trying to quell this city and all of these cries and all of this mourning. And it is said that at this moment, the enemy soldiers come up with an idea that now for us to quiet this city, now let us go and parade the heads of Hussein and the other shuhada in front of these people and in front of Zain al-Abidin and Zainab and Kulthum. And maybe this will quiet Zainab, and maybe this will quiet Kulthum. And it is said that when those heads are paraded around Lady Zainab, she looks up at the head of Imam al-Hussein, her brother, and she says to it, Ya hilalan lamma statamma kamala. غاله خسفه فأبدى غروبا. O you head, O you moon, I would have never expected you to have been eclipsed in such a way, wherein the darkness has now come and covered over your light. Ma tawahamtu ya shaqiqa fuadi. I would have never thought, Lady Zainab says to her brother, I would have never thought, O you part of my own heart, كان هذا مقدرا مكتوبا, that this was ordained by Allah Himself. يا أخي فاطمة الصغيرة تكلمها. Oh my brother Hussein, see this young daughter of yours, Fatima الصغيرة. Speak to her. فقد كاد قلبها أن يذوبا. Because I am afraid that her heart cannot take looking at you in this way. I am afraid that her heart is going to be broken to such an extent that it is going to melt away and her spirit is going to leave her body. Lady Zainab was responsible for taking charge of all of the children, all of those young sons and daughters of Imam al-Hussein and the rest of the caravan. But she was also responsible for Imam Zain al-Abidin. It is said that Imam Zain al-Abidin, his arms are bound and his throat is covered in a collar that is so tight that the blood of the Imam is now dripping from the collar and from his neck. And so Lady Zainab, she says, Ya akhi, لو ترى عليا لدى الأسر مع اليتم لا يطيق جوابا. Oh my brother, look at this Ali. Look at Zain al-Abidin now, while he is imprisoned, while he is shackled, and he cannot even respond to these young orphan children. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. مات الحسين.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein. Our hearts have begun breaking. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. Everyone together. For it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. For it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. We will weep, we will feel sorrow. We will weep, saddened. We will weep, we will feel sorrow. We will weep, we will be saddened. For the days are upon begun breaking, for it's a time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. Zahra, welcome the mourners. We will be here at your service. Zahra, welcome the mourners. We will be here at your service. For your son we cry forever. Let us answer what you are saying, for it's a time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's a time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's a time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. Akbar will begin falling. To Hussein he will be calling. Akbar will begin falling. To Hussein he will be calling. When Hussein will hold the arrow, Akbar will begin shaking, for it's a time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. Oh Hussein, as you move forward, with your strength, please do not turn back. Oh Hussein, as you move forward, with your strength, please do not turn back. You will see your Sakina, who behind you will be pacing, for it's a time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking, for it's the time of mourning. Our hearts have begun breaking. Our hearts have begun breaking. Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein.
You can turn towards Ziyarah. تقبل الله أعمالكم. May Allah accept your a'mal and your azaa for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام ولك السلام وإليك يعود السلام. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على الأئمة الهادين المهديين. السلام على جميع أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام على علي أمير المؤمنين. السلام على فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام على الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة أجمعين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام على الحجة ابن الحسن القائم المهدي. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك وشيعتك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوا على محمد.